and public to the Planning Commission meeting for North Ogden City, February 16th, 2022. I am Chairman Thomas. I'll be conducting tonight. This meeting is being held virtually through Zoom. We'll begin our meeting by an invocation or a thought from Vice Chairman Mason, and followed which, being that it's his first meeting, we will have Commissioner Watson lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I guess since you're participating, I'll take now time. We just want to welcome Commissioner Watson. After we have the Pledge of Allegiance and do our roll call, we'll give him a couple of minutes to tell us a little bit about himself. Let's go ahead, Commissioner Mason.
Sure thing. Our Father in heaven, we gather before this day and this public meeting and ask for thy guidance and blessings in the decisions which are made and the communications which are had. And pray that we can have a spirit of understanding with one another, and we can all seek to further this great city in which we live, and to understand the various needs of everyone that lives here. We ask for these blessings in thy name, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Perfect. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. We'll make note. I don't see Commissioner Lunt joined us. I don't see. Hopefully he'll join us. Oh, yeah, he's as an attendee. John, if you could push him over. We'll make note that all commissioners are in attendance tonight. Can you guys hear me okay? All right.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Well, before we do the minutes, so we want to take a minute and recognize Commissioner Watson. Cody Watson, he's been newly selected or appointed as a planning commission here for North Ogden. Cody, maybe why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how many kids you have? And
that is what defines me these days. My name's Cody Watson, as you can see. I have a wife and 5 kids. I live here in North Ogden, have for quite a while. I grew up here, got married in 98. We moved to Roy, and then I drug my wife, who is from South Ogden, out here, and haven't thought about leaving. So that's kind of us. My 5 kids range from about 21. He lives in Logan, and then the rest are all, we've got 2 girls at Weber High and 2 boys at Bates. And that's, I work for Cox Automotive. I consult car dealers. So specifically, I work for Kelly Blue Book. So that's what I do for a living.
all right. Well, thank you. Welcome. We're excited to have you part of the commission.
Thank you.
We'll item number 2, minutes consideration and action to approve the December 15th, the January 2021, January 5th, 2022, and January 19th, 2022 Planning Commission minutes. Any corrections or things that need attention on those minutes?
You know, I did catch a couple of minor things, but probably should be noted. On the January 19th minutes, page 4 of the minutes, page 21 of the staff report, there's a motion that was made and there's an extra word commission in there. That's minor. Then the December 15th minutes, page 34 of the staff report, page 11 of the minutes, it talks about in a motion like Vice Chairman Mason, Vice Chairman Mason Nancaro. So if you could just take the Nancaro out of there.
I'm trying to get you in there. Just
I know.
Yeah, if they hyphenate that could get really awkward.
That's all I saw. Other than that, I'll make a motion that we approve the December 15th, January 5th, January 19th Planning Commission meeting minutes with those minor corrections.
Okay.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll have our opening meeting statement. I'll turn the time over to our planning director, Scott Hess, to read our opening meeting statement.
Hey, thank you, Commissioner. Before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the staff report, the item will be opened for other speakers. The applicant will speak first and be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following the applicant, any other interested person will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time of up to 5 minutes. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, example, pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be forwarded to the commission. Speakers are required to have registered their full name on Zoom and will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with a previous speaker, then state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speakers shall address all comments to the Planning Commission. Please silence your microphone until ready to speak.
Thank you. All right, ex parte communications. Anybody had any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest on our administrative items tonight? I guess either item. All right, now's the time that we'll open up for public comment. If any public are in attendance with us tonight, this is the time that you can address the Planning Commission. If it's an item on the agenda, we'll allow you to time at each item. If there's something not on the agenda, please raise your hand or type it in the chat, and we will. We'd love to hear from you. See any? I don't see anything else. Any hands raised, John?
Not that I can see.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll move on to our administrative item for tonight. Item number 6, site plan review 2021-10, consideration and action regarding an administrative application, site plan approval, building footprint expansion and parking lot expansion of the Coldwater Animal Hospital and Castle Creek Dental, located at approximately 2671 North Washington Boulevard. Presenter will be Brandon Bell. Brandon?
You need to be unmuted.
Oh, sorry about that. Thanks, Commissioner Thomas. So John has just pulled up the site plan for the potential parking lot addition, as well as a building footprint expansion for the Coldwater Animal Hospital and Castle Creek Dental site that's just on the corner of Washington and Pleasant View Drive, on the southwest corner of that area of town. Just to give you a few background details about this, the project area is approximately 1 acre. It's at 2671 North, 400 East. It's in most of the property is in the C2 zone. There's some that is not in the C2 zone that we will address a little bit later. There are also a companion rezone application being proposed for this to address the fact that only part of the property is in the rezone, or is in the C2 zone. In addition to that, there's also will need to be a subdivision. We anticipate that subdivision will not need to be seen by the Planning Commission and will be reviewed at the staff level, given that it doesn't meet we don't believe it meets the threshold to be required for Planning Commission review, but should be able to be reviewed by staff. Staff does recommend that the subdivision be required to be submitted and administratively approved prior to the building permit. And one extra caveat that we have with this situation and site plan is that this the property that is proposed, where the addition is parking lot addition is proposed to be constructed on is actually on property that's owned by the city. So the city has been reviewing it with regards to conformity to city ordinances, but also has an interest as a landowner and will need to work out a contract with the applicant. And so there's a little bit of extra involvement on the city's part.
Brandon,
Yes.
sorry to cut you off. I was just wondering if that property has a zone. Well, obviously it has a zone, but what that zone is, and is that part of the rezone?
It was actually recently rezoned to the Civic Zone, and I do address that later. Sorry, what was the second part of your question?
I've already forgotten. It was that important.
Okay.
It was what that zone is.
I think it was.
Are we hearing a rezone application for that?
You will be, but you're not hearing it tonight. And so we wanted to get the site plan more resolved before we brought the rezone, especially given there's some multiple moving parts here with regards to a contract that needs to be worked out with the applicant and then also the subdivision as well. One of our requirements is that the property line, that zoning should follow the property lines, and that property line is going to be in flux because of the subdivision amendment. So, and so we haven't brought the rezone forward quite yet at this time, but it will be forthcoming.
It'd be helpful to know maybe what that is potentially going to be rezoned to. And the reason I ask is because it's my understanding that a commercial development like this, if it abuts a residential zone, has to have a fence and, things like
Yes.
that. So is that addressed in your presentation?
It is.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. I appreciate the fact that you're that interested. So
I come out strong at first and then I sleep through the second half.
Okay, well, okay, well, I'll keep that in mind. The rezone will be proposed to be C2 to the same zone as the rest of the property, so that the entire property would be in the C2 zone if approved. So hopefully that clarifies that issue. Okay, so again, the applicant's working to purchase the property. You can see on the west end, it's a rough property line of that. There's a sort of a rectangular shape in red. That's the area that the applicant would like to purchase from the city. This is the version that you're seeing. We've seen a couple of different alternatives that they've proposed. And this addition is one that staff felt met needs of the city if they were going to sell the property to the applicant. Let's see. So again, this is in the C2 zone. And of course, the applicant's required to come before the planning commission for site plan approval. There are some basic setbacks that apply. Staff is, according to our review, the proposed building addition meets all of the setbacks for the building. It's 20 feet back from the front property line. It's also from the 20 feet from the required from the side property line, which is where the property abuts Pleasant View Drive. The proposed building addition is also outside of the required site triangle. And so there's a 40-foot site triangle that's not being encroached upon in this design. And so we feel comfortable with those aspects of the building design. There are also design standards for this property, which primarily the main issue on this is that the code states that external surfaces shall be predominantly natural muted earth tones, and that's defined as non-bright colors representing natural earth colors and values including browns, blacks, greens, grays, rust, etc. It doesn't specifically prohibit that, but any similar colors. And so staff is of the opinion that the elevation that's been provided, which is Exhibit C, if you could pull that up, John, I would appreciate that. It appears to meet the above requirements in staff's opinion. The stucco is tan. There's a softened red brick that's proposed with a dark gray roof. This would also would be complementary to and consistent with the existing structure or building on site. It essentially would match that, and then and is considered by staff to be within the realm of the muted earth tones. Uh, The next issue is there are no internal sidewalks, although I just realized that there's kind of one issue that I think I'll get to later. There are no sidewalks proposed as part of the addition that are on-site required sidewalks, like say from the parking lot to the building. But there is one sidewalk that's out along the right of way that I'll address later. There is an existing sidewalk that's been put in along Pleasant View, and the city engineers just requested that the applicant add that to the improvement drawings when those are completed, so that it reflects the current state of the site. That's a relatively recent addition. And so with regards to the sidewalk that is required along Washington, staff recommends either requiring this sidewalk along Washington Boulevard to be installed, or permitting an escrow agreement with the city council to escrow for the sidewalk for the city to install at a later time. And I'm gonna, if you can give me 1 second, I'm gonna try and add some detail to that requirement. John, is there a way that you could pull up the Google Street View of this property? I know that might take a second, but there are some signs. There are multiple signs, and then multiple utility boxes, as well as a power pole that are all along the front of this. And so, in addition to that recommendation, staff also recommends that regarding the sidewalk, that if the city council does not permit an agreement allowing the sidewalk to be escrowed for, that the location of the sidewalk be determined by the city engineer, including allowing the sidewalk on the applicant's property to accommodate the signs and other infrastructure on site, including requiring the addition of a pedestrian easement to be added to the site at the final location of the sidewalk. The next
Brandon, can I get some clarification on that?
Sure.
On what you're proposing? Where do you envision that sidewalk would go? Where that's a busy intersection, and it's some kids' ways to get to school and all sorts of stuff. Are you thinking it would still meander close to the street, or are you suggesting it could go up and through their backyard, or like what?
Let me see if I can draw over this view.
Because conceptually, I like the idea of having some flexibility on where the sidewalk is. So long as it's, still, keeps in the philosophy of hugging close to the street.
Yeah. Well, okay. So we have the sign and multiple signs in the utility boxes that are all pretty close to the street. And so the point is that it would be somewhere in this front area, like between the building and the street, but potentially behind the signs, or the power pole at some point, and then it would tie back into the front sidewalk somewhere. So it wouldn't be going in a backyard or behind the building, but it would be somewhere in if it was a residential home, what we'd call the front yard. But
and that's so they don't have to go through the expense and the hassle of moving the utility pole and the sign.
Yes, or the signs, etc.
Okay.
So, and just as a kind of a housekeeping note, some of these conditions weren't in the staff report, and so I will actually put those in the chat so that you have access to them when it comes time for a motion. Let's see, the next issue is deals with the landscaping plan and replacement of trees. There are, I think it's 4 trees that will be removed as part of this plan for the addition of the sidewalk. And so our ordinance requires that mature trees being removed need to be replaced at a 3-to-1 ratio, and which would give us a total of 12. And then for that requirement, and then for every 10 parking stalls that are added you need to add one tree. And so there's, I think 15 being added, but we can't do fractions. And so that would just be another one that would be added for a total of 13 trees that need to be added to the site. Those need to be 2-inch caliper trees per our ordinance. And then they also need to be 6 feet tall minimum. If you have a 2-inch caliper tree, that shouldn't be a problem for it to be 6 feet tall. On a related note, the applicant has been required to provide an updated landscape plan. He did that, but that was sort of after I'd completed the staff report. I wasn't able to note it. The staff's recommendation after reviewing that is that the landscape plan could use some adjustment. And that we recommend that the design be adjusted to be a distinct landscape design with a variety of plant species and cultivars spread throughout and across the site, across the area to the north of the parking lot addition, excluding any area devoted to a detention basin in that area, while still meeting this 1 plant per 20 square feet standard. If you look at the plan right now, all of the plants are mostly at the edge of the landscaping area, and then where you kind of see this gray hatching pattern is my understanding that is rock. The alternate landscapes, which I believe refers to like xeriscape or low water use landscapes, they tend to, the requirement is that they be equal or superior to a conventional turf grass dominated landscape. And so staff's recommendation is that there be a little bit more attention applied to that, and that they be spread out through the site with a variety of plant species and cultivars, while still meeting the 1 plant per 20 square feet recommended standard. And again, that's one that I'll put in the chat so you can refer to it. The next issue is that the applicant needs to work with the city engineer to adjust the detention basin on site or to excavate another area of the site for detention. The staff recommends that they show how they plan to do that, and that approval of that adjustment be delegated to staff as part of the landscaping plan and documents submitted to the city engineer. The next requirement in landscaping is that the applicant's required to have a minimum of 20% of commercial sites be landscaped. The calculations that we were given by the applicant state that they have actually 40% of the site. So they're well above the required 20%. We appreciate their compliance on that. And of course, that figure may be adjusted if there are minor adjustments to the site plan, but nothing that would take it below 20%. So the next issue addresses just the tree sizes of 6 inches, 2-inch caliper trees, and then a minimum height, 6 feet height. Staff does recommend that the applicant pay particular attention to complying with that standard because we do inspect those trees on site at the time of installation when we review their landscape plan and make sure it complies to what the documents that they provided. The next issue refers to an issue that Commissioner Mason also brought up. Commissioner Mason, you were accurate in stating that there is a 10-foot buffer required between residential zones. The property to the north is a residential zone, but it's that area of the site is not being adjusted. And the property to the west, I can't remember what it was rezoned from. It actually used to be an RE20 zone, and but it was just rezoned to C2. Or I'm sorry, C2, the Civic Zone. So that residential buffer requirement goes away, but there's another buffer requirement that comes into play that I'll talk about in a minute. But on this issue of the Civic Zone and it being rezoned to the property to the west, there's a requirement that it says when there's a less intense zoning designation, that there needs to be, let's see if I can, that where it's site plans adjacent to a properties with less intense zoning designation, then it's 10 feet minimum and must be planted with trees, et cetera. We feel like that this specific requirement has gone away because of the Civic Zone rezone to the west. Staff does not consider that the Civic Zone can be considered a less intense zoning designation, as not all of the uses in that zone are automatically less intense. So for instance, if you look at the building that I'm in right now, the municipal building that we usually meet in when we meet in person for planning commission, that's a very similar building to what is this Coldwater Animal Hospital is, and it will likely at some point be rezoned to the Civic Zone. And so this type of building, we don't consider it necessarily less intense. And so that's one example of why we don't consider the zone to be less intense. And so that specific standard does not apply. However, again, there similar requirements actually come up later that are more currently a little bit more restrictive in this area. And so on the alternate landscape options, I've already addressed that and made the recommendation there that that they adjust their design, and that can be delegated to staff to work out the final iteration of that design with the plants spread out throughout the area, with the exception of any retention basin that's in the area. This next requirement relates to parking lot landscaping, and it actually, let's see, even though the 10-foot buffer went away because of the rezone, or at least in staff's interpretation it did, and of course the planning commission's welcome to weigh in on that if they have a different interpretation regarding the Civic Zone not being less intense. There is a requirement that perimeter landscape areas of parking lots shall be a minimum of 20 feet wide. And so that would relate to two areas on this parking lot addition, the area to the north and then also to the west. Let's see. However, if it doesn't say that there has to be a buffer, it just says if there or a setback, it just says if there is a separation between parking lots, that it needs to be 20 feet. And so if a parking lot crosses a property line, which in commercial areas they often do because you have property owners that share, have shared parking lots so that customers can access all of their properties through one parking lot, then we believe that the requirement for a 20-foot buffer is not applicable. And so if you can see the very west end of the proposed property, this is on the former Public Works site. It would be merging into or close to the asphalt that's currently on that site. And so staff is recommending, sorry, let me pull up a different document, that staff recommends that the 20-foot landscape buffer not be required on the west side if the parking lot addition connects to the asphalt on the city property. Staff also and then however, that does leave the issue that there's technically a 20-foot requirement for the north side. You can see there's a small white building, and then there's kind of a triangular with the red property line on the north end of the parking lot. Currently, that needs to be 20 feet. We noticed this after we completed the staff report, but we are currently recommending that there's an ordinance amendment that was in the works for other reasons due to another application, and that will be forthcoming in the next few weeks. And so we're actually recommending that ordinance be amended. What we're currently recommending is between that small white building and the parking lot, that in areas like that, it would need to be 10 feet as opposed to 20. We feel that that's more reasonable and more fitting for that sort of situation. And so what staff recommends on this issue is that the site plan be approved with the condition that well, let me add one detail. The parking lot right now, I don't remember the exact number, but it's like 8.5 or 8.7 feet. So it still wouldn't meet that 10 foot requirement, but then there would, at the front, it's 20 feet back, and that 20-foot requirement from a street, which is a separate requirement, is also being proposed to be amended. And we believe that if that ordinance passes, that this parking lot location could be adjusted slightly and meet both of these different setback requirements. And so staff recommends that the site plan be approved with the condition that the parking lot location be allowed to be adjusted slightly so it can meet the amended parking lot setback ordinance on the north side, and that issue be delegated to staff for approval. As it stands now, it technically doesn't meet the setbacks. And so we feel like the amended ordinance may be a way forward to address that issue.
Brandon, 2 questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm trying to understand all of this, and you're talking about two different things. So on the one regarding the west side, are you suggesting that there's just not a curb there, and that way that parking lot essentially blends into a future parking lot in that area? Is that what you're suggesting?
It would blend into existing asphalt. So not
But
quite
there's
an
not existing asphalt there. So are you saying they just don't curb it? Like what? I don't understand how that works.
So my understanding is that there is some existing asphalt there. I didn't get a chance to go back out to the site, but like on this issue specifically, but there is some existing asphalt on the site.
Okay. So
the point is that it would essentially be merging with the parking area or asphalt on the site to the west.
okay. And so, I mean, my concern would be that we've essentially made a way where people can drive onto that property. And I don't know if it's gated or not, that's the old public works facility, right?
Right.
And I'm guessing that's got the asphalt. And maybe that's something you can just drive onto from right now from the street. But essentially, if we did this, we kind of give someone an avenue into the backyard of that property, if that's paved. So that would be one concern. And then my other question is so like you're asking them to move the parking lot for that white structure that's right there. What is that thing? And is that actually a building that's?
It's a cell phone tower.
Oh, it is?
Yes, it's their infrastructure.
All right. I was thinking it was like an old shed or something that maybe wasn't even in use. When you look at it from Google Earth, you really can't tell that.
I think it's a concrete structure, isn't it, John?
Yeah, it's the power and control structure for the tower. So it is like a little building, but it's on a concrete pad, or it might be concrete entirely, like a box they brought on site.
So that's not going anywhere.
Right, and we anticipate that as part of the sale agreement for the property for this parking lot, there'll be a cross-access agreement signed that would allow for access to I'm going to zoom in on it, over here on the west side to this entry. My button's not working. This entry off the street. So we kind of anticipate that being part of the agreement is a cross access so that they can utilize that to get in and out of the parking lot.
Oh, okay.
I have a question. If part of this had to do with the Civic Zone, if the city decides to sell it to them, is the sale of that similar if it's another zone, or is there specifics that have to be taken into account since it's Civic?
Well, the portion of the property that would be sold to the applicant would be rezoned, and staff is away from the Civic Zone to the C2 zone. And so staff has recommended that the approval of the site plan be conditioned upon the rezone of the property to the C2 zone. Yeah.
So does that require additional approvals because it is a civic zone?
It'll require approval of the rezone.
Okay.
That's the only additional approval.
And then second, where it's going into old public works station there, is there any hazardous waste problems because of the soils and that may be contaminated?
Not to my knowledge. John, do you have any insight on that issue?
We're not aware of any, but we can ask Public Works prior to presenting this to the council.
I just didn't know because, sometimes because of all oils and that they're using and it seeps into the soils. I didn't know if there'd be a problem.
Yeah, not to our knowledge, but as John said, that we can ask the Public Works Department.
Okay.
Okay, so I think I've covered everything on that. Well, there is one additional issue that there is an easement to the west to accommodate that currently feeds some utility lines that go to that cell tower equipment. And so if for some reason the property has to expand or overlap on that over that easement, the applicant will need to purchase the property subject to that easement and include it on the plat that's associated with this site plan, the subdivision that's filed.
Hey, Brandon.
Yeah.
When you wrap that up, I have a question. Sorry.
Sorry, when I'm what?
When you're done, I have a question.
You're great to go right now.
Okay, so early in the presentation, you mentioned that you were going to be talking more about the sidewalk, and I was thinking you were going to maybe show where you almost alluded to the fact that there was an interior sidewalk or connectivity between these two existing parking lots. Maybe I thought the reason I'm asking, and I'll just tell you, is because I'm in favor of not holding escrow on this for the sidewalk and actually connecting the two parking lots with a public sidewalk. But I thought you were maybe going to talk that there's already some connectivity or something there.
No, sorry. What I was trying to say that there's not an internal sidewalk, along in the property that goes between parking lots or anything like that.
I thought you were saying there was. Sorry. So
That's
I was
okay.
wanting you to clarify that.
Yeah, glad we're clear on that.
Okay, thank you. So your comments on the sidewalk were just that that one of our considerations could be that it meanders in a different way than a traditional sidewalk without the same setbacks. Was that it? Because you alluded to something you were going to talk about further on that.
Yes, that's correct. And I ended up addressing everything that I had to say on the sidewalk earlier, I believe. So,
Okay, I'm good.
Okay. And then I guess while we're on it, if John, could you scroll to the east so that we can see the property to the east, and we'll kind of discuss that issue of the public sidewalk. It's a little bit harder to tell here in plan view, and I cannot seem to find the annotate feature right now for some reason. But you've got several structures, and John, if somehow you have the annotate feature and you can see these, you can feel free to circle the signs. Thanks. So you can see in the pink there, he's circling a sign. There's another sign that he's circling now. And then there's a power pole that's in this area as well. And so the point is these sort of block the area that's conventionally used for the sidewalk. And so staff is just recommending, let's work out a solution that they either need to escrow for the sidewalk, or they can work with the city engineer to find a solution to making a different location for the public sidewalk that still gets to the south side of the site and connects with the sidewalk at the south end of the site. So since the traditional area has at least two signs, I think 2 utility boxes and a power pole that would need to be moved in order to go in its conventional location. Okay, so the next issue is parking lot requirements and capacity. Basically there's 2 standards you could use. The proposed plan meets both of those standards, whether you consider this under the office standard or the medical and dental offices, which is a more natural fit. You're supposed to have 3 stalls per examination room or dental chair. Currently, when you look at the entire site, well, they're adding 7 chairs for Castle Creek Dental on the lower level and no new exam rooms. What that would mean is that you'd need to add, I think, let's see, 3 stalls per. You need a total of 36 for the dentist office, and then 12 total for the vet office when you combine the existing portions of the building with the addition. And they're adding 15 to 39, which gets you to 54 stalls total that they're proposing, which is 6 above the required, which is 48 stalls. So they're several stalls above the 48 required stalls. Staff's of the opinion that the proposed parking stalls to be added are sufficient to meet the needs of the site, and that the parking requirements are met with a little bit extra. And so the next issue is trash enclosure. They did not submit a design for a trash enclosure. At this time, staff recommends that a trash enclosure needs to be provided as part of the site plan, and proposes that the trash enclosure design and location may be delegated to be approved by staff to ensure it meets the above requirements in the ordinance. The main requirements of the ordinance are a minimum of 5 feet height for a solid enclosure, and that the gate on the enclosure be a solid or baffled gate. Baffled just means that it's kind of like blinds, but the blinds need to be closed so you can't see through them. That's essentially what a baffle is a blind that's closed, but in a way that you can't see through it, so that it allows for ventilation, but you can't visibly see into the enclosure. And one
Question on that. How do they handle their hazardous waste since they are type of a medical clinic? It can't be part of the trash enclosure. How do they handle it?
I don't know that for sure. I'm guessing that the applicant can address that. My understanding, just from personal life experience that's sort of random, I believe that there are courier services that can take that away. And I don't know what the quantities of that are, that it's a large amount. So I'm guessing that the applicant can address that question. I don't know the exact answer. With regards to signs, additional signs have not been provided, and we're assuming as staff that they're not planning on adding additional signs. However, if they were to add additional signs, those could be reviewed administratively by staff at the time, and they can just submit an application for a sign permit. I don't think I'm going to go through and read all of the recommended conditions of approval to summarize, because they're a long list, and I've stated them each in one way or another. But what I am going to do is, there were some, as I mentioned, some of these requirements were added after the staff report, some of these recommended requirements. And so I'm going to put those additional recommended comments or conditions of approval in the chat. And so, depending on how you make your motion, you could reference those staff reports that are listed in the staff report, as well as added in the chat or mentioned in the oral report. So I think that, let's see if there's anything else that I need to address real quick. Just 1 second, I've got to get to the right document. The general plan area shows this area as downtown mixed use. We believe this falls under that designation. The Planning Commission should consider whether this proposal meets the North Ogden zoning ordinance standards, including if the recommended conditions of approval would bring it into conformity. And I think that covers everything. The staff recommends approval of the site plan subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, the written report, as well as those that will be placed in the chat momentarily and have been mentioned orally. So I think that covers everything for my prepared remarks. Does the commission have anything for me that they'd like to ask?
I've got a question, Brandon. This is Commissioner Lunt.
Okay.
The buffer between the parking lot on the north side and that white building, I believe it was the applicant made a comment in the chat that it's just a concrete pad, and looking on Google Maps, it looks like that is correct. It's just a concrete pad right now. Does that still apply if that's the case?
Okay, sorry, that on the north side, you said?
Yeah, that white building doesn't look like it's actually still there.
Okay. Yes, it does. It just has to do with the property line. It's not related
Okay.
to the building, but that's a good
Gotcha.
question. So, it looks like for some reason, I cannot copy and paste the text into the chat. So I guess if you want to just reference those additional conditions which were mentioned in the oral report, if you are in support of those. Are there any other questions for me?
Thank you, Brandon.
Okay, you're welcome.
We will now be able to hear from the applicant. I believe he's with us tonight, right? Val, John, if you'd unmute the applicant.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you all for all of your hard work. Brandon, Scott, and John have put a lot of time and effort into this. Lauren's been part of that team as well. And I think we've been able to get really quite close to the end result for what's in the city's interest and for the two businesses that have enjoyed being here in North Ogden since 2003. So I thought maybe I could just talk to a few of the comments that you had and just clarify those from our perspective and see if that gives you a little bit more information. First of all, the hazardous waste, we do have an off-site company that takes care of that. So there's nothing that's going to go down into that particular thing. We're aware of the requirement to have an enclosed space. That's new since we had the building constructed that many years ago. So we're aware of that, and we'll make sure that happens. You already talked about the building. There's not a white building there. It's just a fence, and it is more property line than it is building setbacks. The engineer's calculations for the building expansion at our current detention pond that's landscaped there, just to the east of the entryway into the Castle Creek Dentistry, there has enough capacity to handle the building expansion without having to disrupt the mature landscape there. And there's still another couple hundred cubic square feet of capacity there. So the other detention pond for the new parking lot would be as described in the landscape plan. Brandon had made some suggestions to incorporate some bark mulch in the areas that are not in the detention basin, so there's not a reflection of heat. So we can update that landscape plan based upon his recommendations, spread out the plants, and put some plants to the north of that parking lot as well. One thing that hadn't been discussed is that the Public Works Department wanted to maintain access to that property to the north. They don't go up there very often, but they would like to maintain access to that. So instead of a traditional 6-inch curb, it would be a flat cut curb on that north side, so it still allows them to access up in that area in the few times that they need to do it. So Dave Espinoza had some input on that, and I think that was positive. I wanted to make sure, Brandon, I understood you correctly. There are two ordinance amendments that are pending. One is the setback from the property line from the 20 feet to some other distance. That approval of that ordinance change, even though right now it shows that we're 20 feet away from that corner on the closest spot, you think that's going to be reduced and would allow a shift, a south shift of the parking lot in order to qualify for a 10-foot easement by the white building. Is that correct?
Yes, so you're right at 20 feet on the south side against Pleasant View Drive. And so if the ordinance gets adjusted to be 10 feet, you need, 1.3 feet somewhere to shift the parking lot to meet the 10 feet from the property line. And so we think that we think that landscape buffer is going to be, or it's the 20-foot thing setback is going to be adjusted to a smaller number. And so
Okay.
we're just saying, shift the parking lot would likely be able to be shifted to the south a little bit closer to Pleasant View Drive so that it can meet the 10-foot requirement if it gets changed to that on the north side.
Very good. That makes sense. And then the other ordinance that's pending some adjustment is the buffer, from a 20-foot buffer on the west side to, fulfill that other. So basically this could be a cross access. So those two adjustments would put this in line with what the city's needing.
Close. What we're saying is that on the west side, we don't believe that the 20-foot buffer would apply if it connects with the asphalt on the west side. And so that 20-foot requirement wouldn't be applicable because it'd just be a continuous asphalt area. What we are saying though is that there's still a 20-foot requirement on the north. And so we're thinking that it will be changed to something closer to 10. And so that's the one that we think is going to be applicable and needs to be, adjusted. The parking lot will need to be adjusted and will be able to be, that requirement will be able to be met if we think if it's reduced to 10.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you. The last one was the sidewalk, and in talking with Lauren, I understand the master plan. There's not any sidewalk on the west side of Washington Boulevard all the way up to Alberta Drive. And I just tried to ask him, with that in mind and knowing that there's going to have to be a lot of work and, property acquisition from some private property owners. We want to make sure we do it right, and the city's in total control of making sure that gets done right. He wasn't sure if it's a 4-foot or a 6-foot. Is there going to be some type of a mow strip? And so when I've done something with Pleasant View City, they say, well, we don't want to necessarily commit. We don't know what we're going to do from a master plan, but we don't want to be on the hook for the cement, to put the sidewalk in. And so, Val, go ahead and put some money in an escrow account that reflects the cost of constructing the 4-foot wide sidewalk. And then it's set aside and you're able to be at peace, not knowing that the city doesn't have to pay for that improvement. And if there's ever some time when you say, boy, it's just too much of a hassle to get the private property owners that are non-businesses between us and Alberta Drive, they won't sell, or it's too expensive, or we've decided the sidewalk on the east side of Washington Boulevard is adequate for our needs. If in 10 years that you decided not to put in, then that escrow account goes back to us or something like that. I don't know where the city's at on, how firm they are. It didn't seem like Lauren felt like this had been discussed very much. Is more of a future plan that it might be nice to have that. So we wanted to be able to, be good neighbors and put the dollars down there. And if it never happens, because those things take a lot of effort and time and money, then that makes sense. We could do it that way. So that was my.
I'm gonna ask you a question on this. Normally we reserve our discussion till after everyone has a chance to speak, but I wanted you to be able to address the concern I'm going to bring up.
Okay.
And that is that I believe there should be a sidewalk there as part of your plan, if for no other reason, and I have a couple of reasons, to connect those two parking lots for, to give a reasonable way for people to walk from one parking lot on your property to the other. Right now, they'd have to go out into the street and come down. And so normally we do that escrow thing. when sidewalks kind of go to nowhere. You know, if there's a house being constructed in the middle of a block, and you know, and we don't make them just build a sidewalk and then have no sidewalk on either side. But I believe yours is something different for a couple reasons. One is just the busy nature of that downtown area, and also that those two, you know, it connects two specific places on your property. And so I wanted to give you a chance to address that. And I'm going to ask another question to you as well. You know, if this whole parking lot moves, as you know, we're talking about with the new setbacks proposals and stuff, is that something that's going to work for your proposal? Is that parking lot movable for you, or does that, you know, change your whole cost and your whole plan?
Well,
I really don't know.
Yeah, I think that the movement's just going to be shifted maybe 1.5 feet down so that we can have the buffer, the 10-foot buffer between the north property. That's what I'm anticipating.
Well, my concern, my question was if you had any concerns about that, because, you know, it's easy for us to say, oh, on paper, oh, we'll just shift that. But, you know, you may know of some physical hardship to that, or say, oh, that actually, you know, we were going to use this existing, you know, structure, you know, curb or something like that. So I was asking if that's realistic to move it.
Yes,
You know?
I think it's realistic to move it. If it's going to be shifted down, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Can I ask on the sidewalk, when you're saying you're wanting to connect the two parking lots, there's a stairway to the west side of the building that connects the upper and lower parking lot that you can't see. So there's very little, they're really two separate businesses, and there's very little communication from a pedestrian standpoint from up to downstairs. I change the filters downstairs once a month. That's about the only person who goes down the steps. Otherwise,
I didn't realize those were two separate businesses.
Yeah, the upper is a veterinary hospital. The lower is a pediatric dentist.
I see.
And so the sidewalk that would go to the west side of Washington Boulevard would be for other people who might use it. And it brings the point that you've discussed. This would be a sidewalk to nowhere. There's no other sidewalk on that side of the street all the way up north to Alberta Drive.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Was there any other questions? I think that's the 3 or 4 things that I had.
Any other questions, commissioners, for the applicant? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time, everyone.
As we customarily do at this time, we'll open up for public comment on this item before planning discusses. If any of the other public would like to address the commission on this item, please do so at this time.
So we have Merrill Sunderland.
Okay.
Okay, I just unmuted. I guess you can hear me.
Yes.
Quick question. First of all,
Please state your name and address.
always exciting to listen to you guys do your job. That's always exciting. Left, let's see, that would be west side of the proposed parking lot extension. There was some discussion that it would match or mold into existing asphalt. And there was one slight comment. I just want to have that clarified, please. Is it intended that that parking lot would have access not only from the original access of the old parking lot, but have access from the old fire department, east side of the old fire department also? Is that the intent, that to have it, that new parking lot be mixed and online with the old existing asphalt of the public works there, to have an second access to that parking lot? Is that what I heard? I think I heard that. I just want to have that clarified.
It's not intended that it be used as some sort of primary access to the lot, parking lot addition, but the concrete is there and the access already exists. The public works site, they do use it currently, but we weren't going to go to the expense of tearing out that since it's already there, et cetera. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's.
Well, kind of, it didn't, it kind of still left it nebulous. Am I still on? I'm still
Yes.
available to talk, right?
Yes.
There was question as to whether there was a fence blocking that access to the new part of the parking lot. I'm fairly certain there would not be any fence that would block access to people using that area to get into the new parking lot. So you say not intended, but allowed? What's your real take on this?
The intent is that they use the existing access lane that's currently available on Pleasant View Drive to the east for the parking lot addition that already exists for Coldwater Animal Hospital. No one's suggesting that that would be an access that would be encouraged to be used, but at the same time, it's already there.
So, Brandon, the council did talk about the potential of, as part of the property sale, doing a cross-access easement, which would allow for it.
Okay.
Those are some of the things that the council will include in their discussion as they do the property sale.
Okay.
Just because, like you said, it's there, and it might make sense to allow for dual access, especially if Public Works needs to use it to get up to that upper area just north of the parking lot. That we probably wouldn't want to close it off, but I think that's a council decision that they'll make here in the next couple of weeks after we get a decision on if the site plan works.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And
I agree with that, as well as the ability for the city to then fence off that northern half if they choose to, if they don't want people driving up in there. But I mean, that currently already exists.
Okay, well, thank you. Just wanted to kind of see how that's planning to look out. And I did say this, Merrill Sunderland, North Ogden City resident. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I don't see any others at this time.
All right, commissioners, discussion, recommendation.
I remain unswayed on the this is really a sidewalk to nowhere. It obviously connects two different businesses, and by that very definition, I think it. And I'm saying this because I don't think we should just allow the sidewalk to be held in escrow. I think now is the time to make this sidewalk. I don't want a bunch of undue expense on the applicant to move power poles and all that kind of stuff. So I'm totally myself in favor of working with city staff to find a reasonable solution. And if staff comes back and says, hey, we just can't do it, and that reasonable solution has to be that stairwell that was addressed, then maybe we could take a look at it there. But the only thing that really that I really opposed in the whole presentation was the notion of the escrow sidewalk. For a couple of reasons. Like I said, this is a super busy road. Is there any more busy road in all of North Ogden? I happen to know, and I know there's a sidewalk on the south side, and but I happen to know, if you go to North Ogden Elementary, you cross right there at that intersection, and so and there's also, as has been spoken in here, there's not a right-hand turn lane, and which drives half the city crazy right now. And so, it really puts people walking in the street. And yeah, is it only for this couple hundred feet? Yeah, but I think now's the time to get that fixed. This is when the city has teeth to do that, and the applicant's going to pay for it either by putting money in escrow or by actually building the sidewalk. And so I'm in favor of actually creating the sidewalk now. And I actually think meandering it around some of these existing things might be cool. Might be a cool. This is a cool property. I think it's a pretty beautiful building. I love having it there for the city, and I think it's got a ton of green space, like we mentioned in that site triangle. And I think a meandering sidewalk through there really might even add to that, maybe. but I'm in favor of that. I think I don't know how the rest of the commission feels.
Commissioner Mason, I completely agree, but if I were going to include that in some kind of a motion, would you be okay with delegating the review and approval of that design to staff? Or would you want to see it again?
No, I absolutely would be okay with what staff comes up with. I mean,
Okay.
they're going to do a better job than me. I just, it might be that they say, oh, it's just not going to happen. And I don't think so, but, oh, it needs to hug the building so close that, and in that case, I'd want to see it again. But as long as they could find a reasonable path for how wide does the sidewalk have to be there, Brandon? Are we talking 4 feet? Do we know?
I don't know for certain, but I believe it's 4 feet. I'm not, don't quote me on that.
Okay. So I think there's 4 feet to give there. I do. And, if they decide to go 6, I'd even support that. I don't see that happening, but yeah, I would think city staff should be empowered to approve that. I think it's just a condition.
I agree with that. I think that city staff doing it and meandering through there could look really nice, and it feels like a win-win.
Real quick, while there's a pause, I don't mean to interrupt, but John, could you pull up the document that I sent you? Just since I wasn't able to put these in the chat, John's going to put on screen the additional recommended conditions of approval by staff.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the applicant, and I forgot. It didn't sound like he opposed, for the additional trees and stuff you were recommending and things like that.
These are the ones that were not in the written staff report that staff noticed afterward. They're relatively simple, but we wanted to at least let you see them so you can reference them in a motion if you feel that they're appropriate.
Okay, any other comments, discussion?
So one question maybe for city staff again. So if you're going to ask him to move the parking lot per a pending piece of legislation that may or may not pass, does that delay him unnecessarily? Does he have to wait till that passes to, I think he seems reasonable to move his parking lot for that.
I mean, I understand your concern. It would, except for that right now it doesn't meet the ordinance. So it's not really a delay. I mean, the other option is that it be denied or that the parking lot be adjusted to a lot larger degree, because you need to find 10 feet extra feet somewhere at minimum, and well, actually 20 extra feet. And so right now the parking lot doesn't meet the requirements. And so it's not really a delay. It's a pathway forward that doesn't exist unless the ordinance is amended. And hopefully that should be a relatively quick review by the planning commission as well as the city councils. It's a pretty simple ordinance amendment.
But he will need to wait on that.
It won't be able to happen immediately. That's accurate. But it is also the quickest way forward that staff could identify.
I appreciate you looking at ways to make that happen. I still don't understand if that's just a concrete pad. Tell me again, then why we need that buffer?
It's because it's the buffer is from the property line. It's not related to how close it is to a building or concrete or whatever. So the property line just happens to coincide with the location of that concrete pad, essentially.
Well, did we get it all? Do we think?
I feel like Commissioner Nancaro is going to make a motion, but if she's not, I'm prepared.
Yeah, I didn't know if you guys had any other discussion that, I know that there was some comment a couple of weeks ago about like, if there was going to be a park in that area or something, if we wanted to look at this parking lot, but it sounds like everybody's pretty much, has no objection to moving forward with this. So I will go ahead and make a motion. I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Mason.
Well, my one, after coming down as the hardliner on the sidewalk, I actually think that there, do we really need a sidewalk on the west side of the entrance? That is a sidewalk to nowhere. Okay, so we're asking him to, or is that already there? On that south side, do we, the sidewalk talk for me was for what abuts Washington Boulevard or is parallel to Washington Boulevard and not for 2650, because I think we already have a sidewalk on 2650. Correct me if I'm wrong there. Staff?
It's on Pleasant View Drive, and there is already an existing. There is already an existing sidewalk, but it's very new, and so I don't believe it's shown on the site plan.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're not drafting something that makes them have to build extra sidewalk on Pleasant View Drive. That's not already there. Okay,
no.
So because that, I just want to make sure that was worded right. So we weren't building 3 feet of sidewalk from his driveway to the end of the property line, or if he acquires that new property, he has to build 10 extra feet of sidewalk there. I just don't think that's reasonable.
No, the point of the sidewalk is that it would connect to the sidewalk on Pleasant View Drive.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Commissioner Nancaro.
Oh, no, that's okay. So I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the site plan, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, with the addition of the additional conditions of approval that were outlined by Mr. Bell in the oral report and that he's provided here as an additional document we're looking at. The one exception is on the final bullet in the staff report of the conditions of approval that indicates the sidewalk along Washington Boulevard should either be required or an agreement with the city council permitted to escrow for the sidewalk for the city to install it at a later time. Would like to change that to the sidewalk along Washington Boulevard should be required. And then again, as Mr. Bell indicated, some leeway should be given to the location of the sidewalk along Washington Boulevard. And that design review and approval can be delegated to staff.
I second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, Commissioner Mason,
I vote yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right. Let me get back to my agenda here. Our next item, legislative item number 7, zone text amendment 2022-01. Public hearing, consideration, and recommendation on a legislative amendment to consider amending the parking setback and landscape buffer requirements. Presenter will be Brandon Bell. Brandon?
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Just one second, I'm going to pull up my documents. Okay, so this is, I think this hopefully will be a much more simple item than the last one. This is, staff has been working on this ordinance amendment for the last few weeks. The situation is that currently, essentially in commercial areas, the requirement for a setback of a parking lot, both just the actual setback and required distances, 20 feet from basically any property line for commercial uses in commercial zones. And that applies whether you're talking about the setback and landscape from a front property line or an adjacent property line that's adjacent to a public right of way, or in other words, a public street. But it also applies to any other property line, such as an interior property line, say like the back of the current Smith's parking lot, or the side of that where, it has a neighboring property owner. And so there are separate requirements for them in the ordinance, but they both are the same distance of 20 feet. And so we've been reviewing those requirements. Staff is basically of the opinion that they are excessive. There are two applications that are, that this directly applies to, this ordinance amendment that are currently being reviewed or will be soon. One of those we just discussed. And I guess staff analysis on this is that some zoning standards are prepared based on an overall design aesthetic. There's a certain look or feel that is kind of in style at the time, even among landscapes. And over time, that design aesthetic may be determined to encourage standards that can impose an excessive burden on applicants. In other words, it's often possible to maintain a quality built environment, which is one of our goals as planners and the Planning Commission. But that can be done in a way that still reduces the impact of certain design standards and regulations. And when you have a certain design aesthetic, sometimes the mindset can be, well, let's green the city, let's have it green everywhere. But that can lead to some excessive standards, unfortunately, at times. Staff is of the opinion that our current parking setback and landscape buffer standards could use adjustment. They currently, again, require that 20 feet from any property line, whether that's a street facing property line, which are either a front or a street side property line, or just an interior property line that has an adjacent property owner to one side or another. Staff proposes a modification of this ordinance. We propose that we leave the 20-foot setback requirement in place for Washington Boulevard and other arterials or collectors in North Ogden City, while reducing that setback to 14 feet from the back of curb along other streets for parking lots. And I'll go into a little more detail. There's an exception to that 14 feet. It's just essentially another way of arriving at the 14-foot distance, but in unique situations. We also, so that addresses the adjustment to, so it'd be 20 feet along Washington or property lines that are adjacent to Washington or other arterials or collectors. Then street facing property lines that are not adjacent to a Washington or another arterial or collector would be 14 feet. And then non-street facing property lines, what staff is recommending is that it'd be a 10-foot landscape buffer. We actually only myself and John and Scott are here at Planning Commission, but we looked at the one out in the city in our parking lot here, and I've seen others that I feel like personally 10 foot is a good standard. You can have significant overhang of vehicles, and then it just allows a little buffer in addition to what that overhang is likely to be from the adjoining property owners when it's an interior property line. So regarding conformance with the general plan, some of the relevant goals that could be addressed deal with creating a unique and pedestrian friendly downtown, where creating places where people can walk, shop, work, and recreate, increasing safety along Washington Boulevard, evaluating existing crossings and pedestrian use, and improve sidewalks where appropriate. So the reason why we believe that this, I brought up a number of times in these goals from the general plan, the sidewalk, is that we believe that the numbers that we've are recommending still allow for sufficient distance from sidewalks so that they don't, so that there isn't overhang of vehicles into sidewalks, and Then the other issue I wanted to address was, by vehicles hanging, say truck beds hanging over into the sidewalk area where people are trying to walk. We believe the distances are still sufficient that we're proposing. And then the other issue was maintaining or increasing safety along Washington Boulevard. That would be one reason to keep it at 20 feet along Washington and other arterials or collectors. So we just asked the commission to consider whether this would be a positive change for the city. Is there additional language that's appropriate for the ordinance? And is the proposal consistent with the general plan? Staff recommendation is that the Planning Commission conduct the public hearing, consider the information provided, and provide staff with input and feedback to the, it says existing ordinance in the staff report, but it should have said proposed ordinance. And then the last thing we'll do is, I had the text changes, but I didn't have them formally written up into a draft ordinance at the time of the written staff report being submitted. John, and I did submit the ordinance to John. But what's being shown here is, you can see in the top section of text in 11-17-10, we've crossed out some text that says parking lot street frontage. We eliminated that because it's already addressed down in 11-17-3, and just made that sentence applicable to perimeter landscape areas, which would be more these interior sidewalks. And then, or sorry, not sidewalks, but interior property lines. And then the other section of city code that's being proposed to be amended would be 11-17-3, and this is where more of the adjustments taking place. What you'll notice in that language is that, again, it adjusts it to the 20-foot standard only be applicable to Washington and other streets that are noted as collectors or arterials in the general plan. And then what it says is, in other areas, the location of parking lots shall be behind the top back of curb of the street, 14 feet or 16.5 from the edge of the asphalt, if no curb is installed currently along the street. And so the point is if for some reason there's some area of the city that's doesn't have a curb and gutter installed, the width of a curb and gutter is the typical cross section for that is 30 inches. And so that's the difference between the 14 and the 16.5 feet. So it adds that 2.5 feet to make it the same distance, but it's the same distance, just addressing different situations. And then it also would need to meet the requirement of being 4 foot behind a sidewalk, and then all of the parking lot needs to be on private property. So we're trying to, just trying to address any sticking point that could come up in ensuring that there's not, that the parking lot's located so that there wouldn't be overhang of vehicles or something into the public right of way or over a sidewalk or things like that. And so that's why there's 2 or 3 different standards that are addressed there. I think that concludes my comments. Are there questions for me at this time?
Thanks, Brent.
Yeah. I have one.
Okay.
So, I mean, this may not seem to be related, but so, I've been a big advocate of our parking ordinance having verbiage in there for load unload zones. And I've said before that I think we should maybe even incentivize a load unload zone by offsetting some parking stall requirements, right? Things like that. But I just wonder, if we ever got to a place where we had verbiage for load unload zones, would these setbacks be impacted? Because I see those as something that really abuts up to a main street, and I'm thinking, and this, if you guys have dropped kids off at Lagoon, like you're driving down a road and then you pull over and there's this 10-foot section of place where you can just pull over and drop kids or pick them up from Lagoon. And I just want to make sure
if we did something like that, it would probably have its own rules and governance.
Okay. Well, and I agree with that. I just want to make sure that we're not like talking about setbacks and parking and lay down some code here that then is something we want to actually take a a look at, in the near future, and something I would like to have in there. So I just want to make sure that what we do, because what you propose here seems totally reasonable to me, but I just want to make sure that we're not short-sighted and just focused on the one thing when it may be more holistic. Does that make sense? Apparently not to Eric, but
Well, no, I think if we create a load unload zone, it'll have its own rules of saying, hey, you can be this close to the road, and where if it's right next to a parking lot, then it wouldn't be considered, the parking lot wouldn't have to move further away from it. It would come with its own set of governance rules that may impede on existing parking structure or ordinances and things like that anyway. That would all be created when we are able to do that, in my opinion.
that
One
makes
thing
sense.
on this, Brandon, I think it reads to me, it reads a little bit funky where you're saying it needs to be at least 4 feet behind a sidewalk if present, and then all of the parking lot needs to be on private property. I think we need to make that to where the parking lot can be no closer than 4 feet or to the property line. So even if there isn't a sidewalk, there may be one day, or it could be somebody's fence, and we don't want to allow the parking lot to go right up to a fence for the same reason as somebody putting their hitch through somebody's fence when they back up in the stall. So I would like to see it read more like just a minimum of 4 feet from property line to, curb of the parking lot. So we'd have that, create that everywhere. I don't know.
Let me see if this resolves your concern. The text amendment up at the top says perimeter landscape areas shall be a minimum of 10 feet wide. And that would require where there is a landscape area that it actually, the parking lot would then need to be 10 feet. The current standard is 20. So it's not 4, but it's also not 20. The reason why I think that language works is because it leaves it open so that it applies if there's a landscape area and doesn't if not. But then there was one other point, but
aren't they battling then? If you're saying, if you have property between a sidewalk and a parking lot, what else would you consider that from other than landscaping if there's 4 feet between there?
It's the key word is perimeter landscape areas, and I can clarify that language to say, perimeter landscape areas, adjacent to a interior property line. But they're addressing the two different situations of the perimeter landscape areas that are non-street facing is 10 feet. And then the other one is where the sidewalks would be, which are street facing property lines.
Okay.
Does that resolve your concern, or am I unclear?
I don't know. I mean, when it's saying 4 feet behind the sidewalk and then the parking lot needs to be on property line, then I'm assuming that's a perimeter.
So, well, okay.
I understand that parking lots, their property line down the middle of a parking lot as well.
Yeah, and I think that's, I can work on clarifying that language with regards to the fact that that they must be on private property, that is intended only to apply so that they don't cross into public property. But let's see, there was one other issue. I forgot the other comment that I was going to make, but.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm just reading them both together. Yes, I can see that. I was just looking at the one, so I didn't.
Yeah, no worries.
Any other comments? Let's go ahead and open up for a public comment on this item. Any public would like to make comment?
Is this actually a public hearing?
Oh, let me go look back at, I think this is supposed to be a public hearing. Is that correct, Brandon?
Yes.
Let's go ahead.
We open the public hearing.
All right, this time the public hearing is now open for, let me read exactly what it is. The public hearing is now open for Zone Text Amendment 2022-1, amending parking setback and landscape buffer requirements. If anyone of the public would like to make a comment, please do so at this time. If there's no public, I entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
This is Commissioner Mason, I move we close the public hearing.
A motion to close the public hearing and a second by Commissioner Lunt. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, discussion and a recommendation. Commissioners, pretty straightforward if you read them together.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw a pretty practical example tonight of, when I looked at the property tonight, that, on Google Earth, it seemed like I was actually wondering why they would need to be 20 feet away from those interior spaces. And I support, the philosophy behind what we're doing here. And I didn't mean to muddy the waters with my load unload zones, but I just didn't want to make anything that would stomp on that, and then we have to go in and change setbacks again. I didn't want to slow this down, especially where we have this other, we approved something that's pending on this, and I wasn't looking to just slow that down, but that is something I'd like to see. Hint, hint, staff come before us at some point. So I would motion that we recommend to the city council that these changes be implemented as stated by city staff.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
and Commissioner Mason.
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right, that positive recommendation will move on to city council. Now for our item number 8, which is a discussion item. The Shaw Century Farm. Presenter is Scott Hess. Scott?
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. So we wanted to put this in front of the Planning Commission just to give you a heads up of what's going on. So last year in April, we had a recommendation come from the Planning Commission for a rezone of property owned by Jerry Shaw. The applicant was John Hanson Real Estate Group for a rezone from RE20 to R3. And they had a concept on that site with a number of townhomes. So at that time, it moved forward to City Council in May of 2021, and the council indicated that that seemed like too much intensity on that particular property. And in the interim, I realize it seems like it's been a while, but John Hanson's group has worked really closely with staff to look at other areas of the city that have either mixed developments or small lot single family developments that seem to fit more closely with what the city's vision is for this particular area of the city, and has come back with this proposal, which the city council recently saw. So this would likely come back through the Planning Commission should the council and the get to a level of comfort with this particular project and with the proposal that there be some park improvements and other things that would go along with this increase in density on the property. This will come back through the Planning Commission, and I just didn't want you to be surprised by a prior R3 submittal that now is going to come back on kind of like a modified R15 type of submittal with lots that range from 4,000 square feet up to a little larger, and then 2 half-acre lots that I believe would be left probably in the RE20 zone down on Pleasant View Drive. So we have a representative with us from John Hanson, Geneva Blanchard, and would actually like to defer to her to give you a little bit more information on this, and then provide an opportunity for the Planning Commission to ask any questions that they might have, if that's okay with the chair.
That sounds great.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Someone needed to say it.
Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear me though?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Scott, do you have our PowerPoint at all? Has the council seen, or sorry, has the planning commission seen that?
It was part of the packet. Yep. I
Okay,
believe
perfect.
John has that as part of the packet. There you go.
There we go. I mean, Scott has gone into explanation about it. We're just really trying to work with the city and figure out the best design for the property. So I don't know if we want to start with questions or if you want me to go through the PowerPoint. You guys tell me.
Geneva, we approved this at a higher density, I believe, and it's a difficult property from my seat. This is my opinion on this. It's a difficult property because because of its proximity to commercial, because of its proximity to the city center, and then the fact that you have these like legacy homes like on the other side. So, conceptually for me, some kind of a transition into, from your half-acre lots into something more dense seems reasonable, which is why I think I was in favor of your last proposal. But this thing that I've seen, and I reviewed your packet before the meeting, seems even better. I mean, it actually seems like a great development to me. That's without having seen your presentation yet.
Right, and that's kind of
conceptually, I'm in favor of it.
That's what we aimed for, was to kind of meet in the middle where this gives you that nice buffer of some smaller lots and, adds a little bit more open space and still has a good flow. And that's where we really struggled for, honestly, it's been a year at this point. So we're trying to make everyone happy. And I think we finally have a plan that is conducive to adding that area and being next to half-acre lots, but also, adding or being close to commercial and being walkable and things like that. So I think we've added some really nice things into this neighborhood that will make it an asset to the city. So.
Okay, well, thank you. Commissioners, do we feel like we need to go through what's the comments? I like what's been presented, and of course we approved a much higher density once before that got turned down by the council. So, this definitely seems like it probably meets in the middle.
Do you want me to give like a couple of the bullet points? Really, you're right. You approved of a density that was higher. The main things in this whole PowerPoint that we're really asking for a different consideration is the setbacks. They're just a little bit tighter. So it's 5 and 5, and then a 20-foot setback unless the house is in front, and then we're asking for an 18, and then a 15-foot backyard, I believe. So that's really the only difference. There we go. Is a little bit of a tighter setback, but the rest of it is all within your R15 ordinance, I believe.
It's a little bit of a strange question, but who's your target demographic in a home like with these? Because they're kind of smaller cottage homes and quite small yards, right?
Right. Actually, the lots themselves, I think our average, it'll tell you our average lot size is 6,600.
Yeah, but you're using 2 half-acre lots to calculate that, though.
Yeah, and I think when I took that out, we were still at 5 something. So you have a little bit of a bigger lot. Honestly, over the last couple of years, your demographic has changed a little. I think these are going to be a lot of young families. I think you'll have a mix of the ones that can be a slab on grade, crawl space type home that will be your older couple trying to downsize. But I think you'll really see a lot of newly married couples and young families.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of is if you go like a couple blocks below Weber State and those avenues, down in like the southern part of Ogden, down there, where lots were just smaller and homes were kind of closer together. Right. It reminds me of that kind of a return to how building was in the more Depression era, kind of, I think, honestly. But not that that's a bad thing.
Right.
We're running out of space. And
this is a nice in between, but they're smaller lots. There is no HOA, so they're still responsible for their yard and maintenance. So it gives them a feel of home ownership without townhome and, having shared walls and being so crammed. And so it's just kind of a happy medium. That was the biggest piece of is just the setbacks are a little bit smaller than what would be in your R13 or your R15 zone. But I think we stayed within the regulations of everything else.
And so what zone are you going to be asking for when you?
I think we're going to go for that's a Scott question, but I think it's going to be a modified R15.
Yeah, this would be similar to Quail Pond subdivision. They did this. They took a base zone, the R15, and did it through a planned residential unit development. So you can use the PRUD process when you're 5 acres or above. I think that that's probably the easiest way to do it. Then you're not modifying an entire zoning district, but rather kind of carving out or creating a specific piece. One component of this project that's unique is that it's adjacent to a city wellhead and pump station basically. And so there's a component of the property that is not utilizable to construct structures on. And in talks with the city council, since we're next to the old public works site, there's a current proposal of the city essentially giving over some land to a park in exchange for some level of improvement. So that's a piece that's still yet to be determined that you'd see in the project itself, but kind of a small lot, single family density area that would have a built-in park right adjacent to it, and then a street crossing over to get you over to Bicentennial Park. So, you know, could be a really nice asset and neighborhood for the community in this particular area.
Well, I'm only one council member, but I actually think it's a nice way to develop that. I mean, nobody in the city wants land developed, right? Myself included, right? We want horses there. Given that we're not going to get it, and given the other challenges to that, I think this is a nice thing myself.
Any other thoughts, commissioners, to give the applicants a little bit of direction? I like what they've done, and I would be fine with a reduced setback.
Wonderful.
Well, I guess the discussion will be short.
And I have, if anyone has
I guess I do have one question.
Yeah.
What I think can you go back to the plat map on it? Okay, so my one, you know, I share Commissioner Thomas's desire that one day maybe Pleasant View Drive could get capped and not connect to Washington Boulevard. My sister-in-law will hate me if that happens, but I just wonder if like, would this be a connector road between Pleasant View then onto Loman? Because to get out of those neighborhoods, you'd need to come down Pleasant View Drive, hang a left, go up to Loman View, then get onto Washington and take a right? And I wonder if this road would be serviced or if that would be something through the other development there.
So that road is actually 300 East, and it's going to be a major north-south collector. In fact, that's probably one of the biggest design challenges that the applicant has had to face is a small lot, a kind of a difficult to deal with shape. And then the fact that the city wants a 66-foot collector road that will go through it, which right now connects 2600 or 2700 north to Pleasant View and then to Loman View, but ultimately will go north from that point and connect on to 300 East, helping funnel traffic down. And 300 East to the south of this will eventually be a light connection at 2700 north. So it's we're in kind of like an interim traffic planning stage, and this development is kind of taking on some of that and providing that road today that is probably a little larger than will be necessary for this development, but over time we'll be happy that we have that additional right of way.
Okay, so is this not 300 East then that we're talking, this curvy road through here?
Yeah, that's 300 East as it goes through.
And that's 66 feet wide?
I believe so.
It shows it as 60, but
I think it's a 66 easement with maybe 60-foot asphalt.
So-
Well, that would be off a little bit.
So I have no concern about setbacks, but you know, I've mentioned in here before, the Harrisville City did a terrible job of making of allowing some townhomes to be built. There's a road that goes perpendicular to Washington Boulevard, right? Almost when you leave North Ogden, hit the Harrisville City line. And I feel like that can't be a connector road because the setbacks to those townhomes and stuff are so tight. So, you know, you got so that would be a concern of mine. If this is going to be a connector road, do we have enough front setback so that little kids aren't coming out of their front door, taking 15 steps and they're in a connector road, right? It's different if they're in a cul-de-sac, if you're lot 6 and 7 and stuff like that. But if you're lot 10 and 29 on here, do we have enough setback, do we think?
The lots are fairly deep. The other piece actually in adding the setback piece is we did reduce, we were asking for a little bit of a smaller frontage. So I think these lots are 42. I can't remember I think 42 feet of frontage minimum. But the lots themselves have, you know, we haven't really changed the frontage requirement. You're still that 20 foot. So they still have the setback. And I believe one side of this collector road will have a trail sidewalk, which I'm guessing is like a 6-foot sidewalk or some sort of trail system. So there'll be, you know, an offset at least.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not, you know, that we still have connectivity. You know, I'm actually, like I said, I think smaller lots and tighter, you know, tighter setbacks are fine for this area. I think that's nice. Just want to make sure that we're not limiting our connectivity. And it doesn't look like we are, but I wanted to talk through that a little bit.
And that was the hardest part of designing this whole project, was that the road was set. You know, we had to come in and go out a certain way, and we had to design the lots around that. So
yeah, and if, you know, commissioners, if the vision that I pitched there ever comes to fruition, and who knows if it will, meaning Pleasant View Drive would no longer connect to Washington Boulevard. If that happens, you know, this would be a majorly used road. You know, if you live in those ranchette homes there by the golf course and behind Lee's and stuff, to get to Lee's, you'd have to come down Pleasant View Drive, turn up this 300 East, go to Lowman View, hang a right. That would be your way to get to our city center.
No, you turn right on 300 and go down by the Northern Ice and into Lee's. So all of
Well, I
Pleasant
guess,
Drive.
okay, I guess you could, but to get to Washington, to Washington, you'd be taking a left there. I guess that would be an option, Eric. You're right.
There's supposed to be eventually a light there at Washington, so, and 300 to accommodate that traffic.
Okay.
So
right now I wouldn't do that myself, just because hanging a left on from 300 East to 2600 during rush hour is a tough ask.
To get into Lee's?
Yeah, well, to get to Lee's is one thing, but
Or to go to Washington.
Get to Little Caesars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, but you're right, though. We do have options there. All right, I just wanted to talk through it. I have no major concerns. You know, talking through it helps me kind of visualize it.
Commissioner Nancaro, you had a comment a little bit earlier, but
You know, I don't have a comment. I just, I think I like the design of it. I think I like it better than the original one that was a higher density. And, you know, I'm glad you guys addressed that connectivity on that road and how the traffic would go, but I'm perfectly satisfied to, you know, move forward with that.
okay. Well, I hope that gives you some direction, Geneva, there to.
yeah, that's perfect. We really appreciate your time. Hopefully we can start moving forward now.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, that concludes our meeting. We'll open up for public comment here at the end of the meeting. If there's any public that would like to address us, please do so at this time. All right, remarks from planning commissioners. Anything, commissioners?
You know, I know this isn't part of the planning commission's purview, and it was been stated here, but you know, man, oh man, is that lack of a right-hand turn lane on Washington Boulevard a burden. That's, I mean, there's nothing we can do about that, I don't think, but there's 2 left-hand turn lanes and no right-hand turn lane. And it gets traffic backed up halfway up the hill now. And that thing sucks.
You hope it's just as people come down the hill, if they're not turning right, they stay in the left lane.
Yeah.
As to be courteous, but so.
And it's UDOT. UDOT's the one that has said they, at this intersection, because of how many cars go through it, they will not put in a right-hand lane because it would offset the two southbound lanes too far.
Any other remarks, commissioners? How about Scott? Anything from you?
Oh, nothing. Thank you.
John?
No, just there's going to be quite a few code changes. We are Scott and Brandon. I say we, and what I really mean is Scott and Brandon and those in that group are going through the Title 11 and 12 and trying to incorporate everything that we've done over the past 12 months since we kind of were close to finishing, and get them all together so the council can get through it. But it's a huge task, and they are trying to do the best they can. But just so you know, that is coming. We do have that training with Brent Bateman that I think you saw in your email for March 1st. We won't have a meeting between now and then, so we'll send you some reminders, but it'll be right at the beginning of the presentation. So you'll be able to participate in that. And then I don't believe there's anything else, is there, Scott, to talk about?
Can I just clarify?
Yeah.
Sorry, one thing. So just to be really clear, the presentation is on a Tuesday night at a city council work session. It's not at a typical planning commission meeting. And the reason why we did that is we wanted the city council to have the opportunity to listen to Brent as well. Brent is familiar with, he's a prominent land use attorney, and he's familiar with a number of issues that relate to concerns that the council has also had regarding land use and the state legislature's intervention, so to speak, in city land use powers. And so Brent will be addressing some of the dynamics related to that. So that's why it's also at a city council meeting. But as John said, we're trying to put it at the beginning of the meeting, so it's the first item, so that I believe when you're done that you won't need to stay for the rest of the meeting. But it should be a really engaging presentation. I really respect Brent and his point of view, and he has some really fascinating insights.
Okay, thank you. Well, that leaves us for a motion for adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?